If you're a fan of controlling the game and drawing a bunch of cards, stay tuned, because today we are taking a look at Jin-Gitaxias. But before we jump into today's video, I want to make a shout out for Mythatom. Check out their high quality Magic the Gathering and other fantasy products via the link in the notes below and use my discount code LATSEL for 10% off your order. Jin-Gitaxias is a 5 mana 5/5 with War 2, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or more, you draw a card. It also has an activated ability for 4 mana, which you can only activate if you have 7 or more cards in hand, which is not that easy to enable in a normal game of Commander, but this deck is built around to draw a bunch of cards with Jin-Gitaxias, activate them once to generate a bunch of extra value, and after that win against your opponents with token beatdown. I have checked a few lists online and most of them were built in a way to activate Jin-Gitaxias as fast as possible and then to proliferate the lore counters of its backside, the Great Synthesis. Then people want to have an Omniscience turn, draw their whole deck and win with certain win combos. But I personally find it to be a little bit annoying of doing a solitaire turn for 30 minutes, which is why I have built this deck a little bit different. We want to ramp out Jin-Gitaxias as fast as possible and then use him as a value engine for the start. At some point we might flip him to get control over the whole board and from then on win with token beatdown. Let's start off with which cards we are going to ramp. We will start off with Fort Vessel, a great mana rock in this deck because it gives us unlimited hand size, which is relevant in a deck that wants to draw a bunch of cards. As we are a monocolored deck, we don't really care about what our mana rock does as long as it gives us extra mana, which is why we play Mind Stone, which later on can also be sacrificed to draw another card. When it comes to monocolored decks, I often include snow-covered lands in my lists, simply to be able to play extra planar lands and to make sure to not give every opponent of ours who's playing the same basic land type an additional mana advantage with extra planar lands. As there are a few proliferate cards in this deck, I have also added Everflowing Chalice, which we are also fine to cast for 2 mana to give it 1 counter, and then either proliferate it or use it as a simple mana rock. When it comes to monocolored decks, I'm a big fan of Scepter of Eternal Glory, which is a better Gilded Lotus in many decks that run the same land over and over, for example as monocolored decks. As we are a mono blue deck, we will have to control the board and also evade a bunch of powerful attacks of our opponents, which is why we also want to flash in Misleading Signpost. With this artifact we generate a mana advantage and also will put all of the attackers that are pointed at us at somebody else. As Jin-Gitaxias wants to see non-creature spells cast with mana value 3 or greater, we want to discount them, simply because even though we are going to generate a huge mana advantage, we still need a bunch of mana available for the whole turn cycle. As we are a monocolored deck, we of course play Sapphire Medallion, probably one of the best discount spells in this deck. We also go with Case of the Ransacked Lab, which when it's solved also turns into a powerful card draw engine. In some of our opponent's end step, we want to flash in Mind Splice Apparatus, which will accumulate counters over the course of the game, which we can also proliferate. As we are a mono blue deck, we also play a bunch of counter spells, which is why we play Baral, Chief of Compliance, a great looting engine when we counter something of our opponents. This looting effect can be used to put Wander into our graveyard, which enables great evasion for our token army. As we do cast a bunch of spells and Jin-Gitaxias cares about non-creature spells, we want to cast Jace's Sanctum to discount our spells and also get even more knowledge about what's on top of our library. For even more discount and also even more card draw, we also play Archmage of Runes, a powerful creature which is a helpful blocker that discounts our instant and sorceries, and whenever we cast one of them, we draw a card. Once our setup is done, we want to take control over the whole board, which is why we play Archmage's Charm, which will trigger Jin-Gitaxias. We either counter a spell, draw a bunch of cards, or also take somebody's Soul Ring. Another great counter spell that would also draw us a card with Jin-Gitaxias is Cryptic Command. We can counter a spell, draw a card, bounce a non-land permanent, or also tap all of our opponent's creatures to go for our final swing. We play Disallow, which is a great counter spell that can also handle activated and triggered abilities and which will also trigger Jin-Gitaxias. Another great looting counterspell is Refute, which can also put Wonder into our graveyard. As we are absolutely fine with casting more expensive counterspells, we also play Rewind. And as I have mentioned earlier, we do play a few proliferation spells, for example Reject Imperfection, which, if it counters the right target, also proliferates. And now let's talk about removal. We will cast Raven Form. Even though this is a sorcery speed removal spell, we can foretell it early on, and then when we cast it also get a trigger from Jin-Gitaxias. A great one-sided board wipe is Spectral Deluge. Another great spell that we can foretell and later on cast a little bit cheaper, which will also trigger Jin-Gitaxias. If we are getting attacked, we want to cast Etherize, which will bounce all of the attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Even though we are fine playing the more expensive versions of certain counterspells or interaction spells, we still play the cheap ones when the game is not going in our favor, so we play Pongify. A great 1-mana removal spell which we want to target a certain powerful creature of our opponents with, just as Rapid Hybridization or also Snap. And now let's talk about token generators that will create the army of creatures that we need to overrun our opponents with. First up, we play Alandra Skydreamer, which on our second card draw creates a creature, and on our fifth card draw in a turn anthems up all of those creatures. We play Chromehost Seed Shark, which will generate a bunch of artifact tokens which we can later on transform to activate them. Caring about our second card draw, we also play Homunculus Horde, which over the time will grow to a certain amount which our opponents cannot even handle anymore. Another great card in this deck is Metallurgic Summonings, a token creation spell that triggers on our non-creature spells and that can also be exiled to return all instant and sorcery cards back to our hand from our graveyard, but just under a certain condition, which we will be able to fulfill as soon as we have Chromehost Seed Shark and Metallurgic Summonings on the battlefield. My favorite token generator card in mono blue is Ominous Seas, a great card that you can cycle if the game isn't going in your favor, and that will also accumulate counters which you can proliferate and then spend to create 8/8 Krakens. We also play Shark Typhoon, a powerful enchantment that was once really strong in Standard and is now easily accessible for Commander players, and if that one sticks around, you will definitely create an army of flying sharks that will bite your opponents out of the game. And now let's talk about a few cards that will win you even more games. We play Psychic Corrosion. Even though that I have said that we are going to win with a token beatdown approach, Psychic Corrosion is simply so good in this deck that we have to play it, even though we are not interested in milling our opponents out, but we will take a bunch of resources from them. We play Serum Sovereign, a great card that accumulates counters over the time, and then for a small investment of 1 mana turns it into card draw and knowledge about what's on top of our library. Probably my favorite counterspell in this deck is Unravel, a great counterspell that replaces itself, and if we spend less mana than its mana value, we get to draw another card if we have Jin-Gitaxias on board. Due to the fact that we discount a bunch of our spells, this will most likely be able to at least replace itself, and if we have Jin on board, we will draw 2 cards from this one. Another powerful card that I like in this deck is Wizard Class, which will give us no maximum hand size, which is definitely an effect that we want to have, and later on can also pump up our creatures when we want to beat our opponents out of the game. Since we do want to take over really quickly, we also play Primal Amulet, a great discount artifact, which also accumulates counters that we can proliferate and at some point flips around to turn itself into a land which will generate mana, and if we spend that mana on a spell, copies it, which is something that can generate so much value, which will allow us to definitely take over the game. And since we will most likely also draw a bunch of cards in our opponent's turn, we can accumulate counters on Archmage's Ascension, a great enchantment which doesn't see too much play, and as soon as we have enough counters on this one, will turn our card draw into 2 tours, which will allow us to always find the correct answer for what we need in the current situation. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in Jin-Gitaxias. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.